Hello everybody, welcome back to the language tour for Dart. Today we're talking about maps. Okay, as usual, I'm annotating the documentation for you. So let's just get into it. I think before we go through the actual documentation, I want to talk about what a map is just as a concept, okay? And the reason it's called this, because usually if someone thinks about what a map is, you think about, a world map, a map of your country or a continent, and that the most useful thing is to tell you where you are or how to find a particular location. Okay? I don't know the history of where the word map came from. I haven't done that kind of research, but intuitively, what it means to me, unless map has some sort of other meaning, is that you're able to give it some kind of coordinate. For example, a sort of latitude and longitude type thing, or maybe just some value that can then point you in the direction to where you're going. So that's the idea behind a key value pair, is that this is sort of a latitude and longitude wrapped up into one value, and then it tells you what city you're in. So that's in my mind kind of how a map works. Okay. In general, a map is an object that associates keys and values. So that's a very programmy way to say it. For me as a human, that doesn't mean much, because an object, this is sort of a representation of, I don't know, an object can be a vague thing. Like I think everything's an object in Ruby, everything's an object in Flutter, or Dart except for null. So yeah, of course it's an object, but it is more of an object in the sense that it can represent these things like gifts or the noble gases. Okay, you have keys and values. The key is the thing on the left, and the value is on the right. All right, so both keys and values can be of any type of object. Okay, so here you see you've got a string. Down here they're using a number as a key. The important bit is that each key occurs only once. Each key occurs only once, but you can use the same value multiple times. I mean, imagine if we went over here to a map and we said, okay, at this particular latitude and longitude, there's South Korea. And then we gave it the same latitude and longitude, same key, but a different value like Canada. Like that doesn't make any sense. Okay, so you have to have each key occurs only once. You can use the same value multiple times. Okay. So Dart support for maps is provided by map literals and the map type. So there's two different ways to invoke the thing that we'll see. And then here's a couple simple Dart maps using map literals. Okay, so let's just go play around with these things. In Ruby, we call maps hash. Okay, let's format this. Okay, so we've got some GIFs, and let's just print those gifts. Share your gifts with the world, people. All right, so it prints out as a representation of the hash. So including the curly braces that are used over here. You've got your key and your value. You'll notice they don't have the little stringy things because this is a printed version of that. It's just going to print it out, the words itself. But this is kind of interesting. It uses a colon to separate and a space automatically. So that's built into how the hash is printed. So this is the string. The fact that there's a colon in the space separator. if I remove this space over here, I don't think it affects this output. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not wrong. Okay, so whether or not you have one space or many spaces, I think that's still valid, and it prints with the colon space separator. Okay, so that looks like a standard thing. One of the things I don't really like about the using strings is it's just very typey. Like, you always have to have your characters surrounded by these single or double quotes. Like, I think we can do double quotes and it doesn't matter. Let's just change that one like so. Yeah, so it doesn't matter if your string is single quoted or double quoted, it's going to run the same. Just good practice in that with a question mark. Okay. So let me show you what a hash looks like in Ruby. So in Ruby, I would have something like a representation of a hash. Usually I just do something like that. And we have the same sort of, this is pretty common, the curly braces across languages for hashes or maps. And in fact, I want to show you something here in a second. Look at the runtime type of this. At least in the Dart pad, I think it's going to be like a linked hash or something like that. But I want to show you this. So in the early Ruby, I think like Ruby 1.8, maybe up to 1.9, you were able to say like, here's my key, and then they use the fat rocket syntax like that, and you could say, here's my value. And you couldn't use a trailing comma. So that's the one downside in Ruby. But eventually it was like, because I think the way strings are handled in memory, like each string would represent not like a fixed point, so it was more, it consumed more resources as a result. So what they decided to do was make this thing called a symbol. Okay, and then you could have just with it, by using a colon, you could have that value without having to surround the dang thing in single quotation marks or double quotation marks. And eventually they got to the point where they got rid of that and they moved the colon on that side of the key, and you were able to just say, what's the name of it, give it a colon, and then your value, whether that's a string or a number or whatever. So it would be really nice in Dart if we could do that eventually. Just do something like this, and then let Dart figure out that we want perhaps a string or whatever they want to do under the hood. So here's also how you would access that. So I would say something like, hash with the symbol of key, and then that would return 4 or whatever. Let's see. Yeah. So that's just something to be aware of in other languages, I guess, is how they do it and the reasons behind doing what they did. Okay. So, but as far as I know, Dart doesn't have that sort of feature. And in fact, if I try to run this, what happens? It's going to print the runtime type, but it's going to say, first. It doesn't know what first is, so it needs to be a string. Okay. Okay, and I think we're back to being good. And then we're going to actually print the runtime type this time. And it's called a linked hash map. So you'll even see here they use the word hash for the type, at least running in this environment. Okay. Okay. Again, there's more verbose ways to say this. Like, instead of a variable and letting Dart figure out the types, you could say, hey, this is a map, and that's going to work just as well. Let's go back to just printing the GIFs themselves. you can be very specific. You can say it can be anything. Well, right now, let's leave it as a string key and a string value. Okay. And so that's going to, okay, it prints, everything still works. If I wanted to add something like sixth, but use, for example, some number like 23, it's not going to let me do that, because a value of type int can't be assigned to a variable of string, because I've said I expect string values here. Now I can make this dynamic, and all of a sudden this is allowed. Okay. I could also do something like 34 as a key, and just say 34. Okay, close that off with a comma. And it's not going to allow it because it's expecting the key to be a string as well. So now I have to make this dynamic if I wanted this to be the case. Okay, and because it's mixed, it has to be dynamic. I guess you could say object, and that would also work. So it's a little more, I guess, specific than dynamic. I'm not sure what the benefit would be. But I think whenever you just say var and you mix it like this, it's going to set it as dynamic. Okay, so that's a quick little thing there. I showed that you could use numbers as the keys. Remember it said you can't have multiple keys. So kind of like a set, similar to a set. Let's get rid of this. Similar to a set, which has unique values, a map has unique keys. So you can kind of think of the keys as like a sort of set themselves. Okay. If we try to repeat first, okay, it's already yelling at us. It does not like that. Two keys in a map literal shouldn't be equal. Now the cool thing is that it actually allowed it to happen, but if we tried to say, and you can see it's printing one over there, it's printing the aw value that I typed. Now if I want to say give me the value at the key first, I don't know that there's any guarantee. Maybe it always looks up the last one or something. But if this was a sufficiently large hash, I'm not sure the logic behind which one they're going to go fetch, whether it's that one or that one. Yeah, I don't know. So you're better off not having multiple like that, okay? Because you could get unexpected results if you expected to indeed return partridge. Okay. So Dart infers that gifts has the type string. That's whenever we had only strings. And then the other one, of course, would have been an integer key and a string value. Okay, we saw that adding the type whenever it was locked down and specified that it didn't like that. Okay, you can create the same objects using a map constructor. Okay, let's do this. So one thing we looked at in the last section about sets was if you had an empty curly brace assignment, you had to specify that it was a string because map was the default selection for that. So what that looks like is var empty map. Just like that. If you wanted a set, you'd have to say what's my value of the set. Okay. So I'm just going to leave that like that for now. Okay, so we have a different way to say, yeah. So this empty map. This is another way to just do this. Okay. Now I didn't say what kind of values it could have here. I don't. Maybe if I did this, then I could use an empty map this way. But if I use the curly braces, if I put anything here, I think it becomes a set. So if you wanted to specify the type of the empty map, but use this notation, you'd have to put the type specification on the left. Okay, this is assignment, so these don't exist in the first place. So for example, if I comment these out, it's going to find that there isn't a key called first, and it returns null. So you can put anything in here. I can put my name, and that's going to return null. There it goes. Okay, as soon as I say for the key Aaron, give the value partridge, and then I retrieve the value at the key Aaron, it returns partridge. Okay, so that's how that works. These are just, this is like hash assignment, or sorry, map assignment. Okay, and finally we can print all of our GIFs, and we'll have similar to what we had a moment ago in the last example. Oh, I still have Aaron. There we go. And first is partridge. Okay. Again, this is just a way to, this is not, so when they say a map literal, that's when you use like the curly braces. When you use the map constructor, it's not a map literal. It's using the map constructor notation, where on the right side of the equal sign, you have the map, your optional types. We don't have to put these here, I don't think. I think you can just do this. Yep, okay. And it figures it out for you. As soon as I as soon as I specify the first one, it's going to think that all the keys need to be strings. All the values need to be strings. Now, I could be wrong. What if I use the number 2 here? Instead of second, I say 2. Okay, so it does allow that. Because I haven't specified it, I think it has to make it dynamic, because it doesn't know what kind of keys and values you're going to be putting in here. Okay. So better to have good data structures and specify the types. And I think you have to specify both. You can't just specify one or the other. Yeah, and it's not gonna like that because that's a number, not a string. Okay, that is the using the map constructor as opposed to the literal. Okay, there. Put this little note here that you can put new in front, old or Dart. Programs will have this. Okay, let's just get rid of that because it's easy. Okay, so you could say new, and if that syntax highlighting helps you, then go for it. I think it's fine. I wonder if you can do it with a literal. Can you do that? I don't think it likes that. A literal can't be prefixed by new. Okay, so that's a cool thing to see. Can't do that. Awesome. Cool. Okay. Let's see. Adding a new key value pair to an existing map, just as you would in JavaScript. So there's your existing one, and then you added it. A second ago, we just had the empty one, and we were able to do this. So I'm not going to show that. I think we demonstrated that in the last one. When you retrieve a value, okay, we saw that we can print and get partridge. Remember, these asserts don't really work in Dartpad. If you look for a key that isn't in a map, you get a null in return. Remember when I tried to pass in Aaron or any key that didn't exist, it just returned null. That's what that is saying. You can use .length to get the number of things. Boom, 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 .length. By the time I'm printing this, I've already assigned 2 key value pairs to this empty dude. That guy's not being used. If we run it, we should get 2. Okay, so that was good. And then to create a map that's a compile time constant, add const before the map literal. Okie dokie. Let's take this whole thing. Okay, let's format that, even that, and we will print constant map. Okay, so when I ran this program, instead of figuring out at runtime, putting these values into memory and doing the assignment, at the time I compiled the program, this const designator here on the right said these are like reference values. They're not going to change. I need to use them in my program. They're really constant. So those were set. But it wasn't until we ran the program that we were able to actually make the assignment. Okay, let's see, just for grin, it's going to do that. Okay, so you can even go one step further, and this might be redundant. It might be the case that if you say constant map, that that's going to create the constant at the time of compilation. So this might be redundant, doing it on the left and the right. It's kind of a weird thing with Dart. I haven't seen that in other languages. Okay, and then so we're gonna uncomment this. If we try to reassign a capital H, it's gonna cause an error, it says. Let's see that. Yeah, cannot modify an unmodifiable map. Same thing for final, I'm pretty sure. Okay, what about var? Yeah, can't do it on any of them. Okay, because we've said that these values over here, when they're assigned a constant map, like it's effectively a final constant thing. Okay. All right, we did show, I think, the spread and the optional spread earlier in the if and for, the collection if and for, and so you can see those in the sets and lists. I guess it wouldn't hurt to just do one. Okay, now we can't spread anything into here because we made this a const, so let's make that, we'll just call this a hash map. How about that? Okay. Okay, so if we wanted to, let's say we have a list of, let's say, var others. Okay, and then we'll just say they need to be values. Let's say 34 is deuterium, 55 is Kimbodatum. I'm just making these up. And then let's say 67 is Darfolium. Okay, those are our fake chemicals. Deuterium might be real. Others. Okay, when you're typing these out, don't forget to add that. Good thing. I love the linter. It's great. It helps keep you in line. Okay, so now what we want to do is kind of like smush these things together. I think in Ruby we would do something like hashmap.merge and say others, and then that would bring them together. Right. But if I wanted to instead, let's see, how would we do that? See, that's kind of hard. I think we did it in lists originally, where we spread it in. So let's see what they did. So they just kind of like created a new one and plopped some things in. Okay. Oops. Yeah, so what we want to do is say, let's just have this hash value here that we're just going to print on the fly. For example, if I do hash map, is that going to be a hash and a hash? A map and a map? It is, okay. And that's not what I want. So I think what I would do is, maybe you can do this, add all, and then put in your hash and map. What is it not like? This expression has a return type of void and can be used because you're printing that. Okay. So maybe we have to cut this out, and our final thing, there we go. Let's paste that. Okay, and now we're going to print our final thing. It doesn't like that. because it still returns void, so I'm not sure how to add. This is kind of a contrived situation. So maybe instead what we can do is say, like, for example, let's say we have like 2 helium, okay, and then we want to probably spread in the others, okay, and now we'll print this final thing. So now we should just have 2 and then the 3 that I created. Okay, there they are. That's good. So that's how we would just plop that in there. If you tried to just put it here, Dart's not going to be smart enough to figure that out and kind of merge it together. You have to do that. Yeah, if you wanted to put in your hash map, I think you'd have to spread this in too. Okay, and now we'll have all 6. Is that the case? Yes, yes it is. Okay. So when you play around with it, you'll get, a better feel for how to use that spread operator. Okay. And then you could also do the conditional thing. Let's see how that's used again. Let's just try to do it and error our way through it. So if this were me, for example, can you use a ternary statement? If it's true, then do 99 perfumium. Otherwise, null. No. Contains both map and iterable spreads. Okay, so we don't want that. I think we used like an if statement, right? We said if something is true. Oh yeah, I think it was like promo active. Let's do that. Var, or let's just say bool. Promo active. Let's make that true. Promo active. Okay. What are we gonna do? We're going to add 99 perfumium. Yeah, this is when you gotta go look up the docs. Okay, and we did that in lists. It showed us where is the conditional thing, if this. Okay, so it's all in like one line. If it's true, do that. I don't think there's really like an else involved. Okay, so similar to that fat rocket syntax, maybe we would do that. Okay, so now let's just print the others and see if we get these 4 because promo active is true. There we go. Okay, so we didn't have to even do that. Okay, so it's just kind of floating in space is what it looks like. It's kind of weird. It looks undartly, if you will. But that's it. That is what it is. If this was toggled to false, we would just get the 3. It's saying I have dead code because that never gets called because that's a constant right now, but that's fine for our purposes. Okie dokie. So that's what you can do. Conditionally make things. You can merge maps together. If you call the runtime type, at least in Dartpad, it's called a hash map. And that is it for maps, I believe. Yeah, so they had generics where you can learn more about that, and also the libraries tour of the Maps API. Looks like it's there's a few more things there. So be sure to check that out if you want to go in more depth. Next time we'll see you on runes and grapheme clusters. Catch you next time.